Welcome to the Bible Forum. It is Father's Day, June 21st, 2020. And this is the Bible Forum. Are you signed up to get our weekly rundown of topics? This is a once-a-week email that is sent out every Saturday to alert you to the topics that are going to be coming up this week. And to get onto that email list, you just simply have to email me at thebibleforum@gmail.com with your request. No other email is sent from the Bible Forum unless the world is coming to an end. We don't do that. But we're glad that you're here. This is Father's Day. We've got a lot of news and on this week, this Father's Day week. The commercial truck driving industry recently conducted a poll on its CDL Life app. There's a poll of over 1,283 respondents found that 79% say they will refuse loads to cities with disbanded or defunded police departments. Responses on this app included quotes such as, "If something was to happen and you have to take matters into your own hands, then you risk being prosecuted for protecting yourself." At the Supreme Court in our nation's capital, according to Bloomberg, this past Monday, that High Court rejected even hearing 10 gun rights cases, including challenges to New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Maryland laws that restrict permits to carry firearms for self-defense, as well as bans on assault weapons in Massachusetts and Cook County, Illinois, which includes the utopia of peaceful coexistence known as Chicago. Being a New Jersey boy, I can tell you that in New Jersey it takes an act of Congress. A judge has to say you need the weapon, and then limitations are put on that like you wouldn't believe. Two of the staunchest conservatives on the High Court let it be known they weren't happy with their colleagues. Justice Clarence Thomas, with evident mockery, compared the court's disregard for the Second Amendment with liberal justices' knee-jerk predictability on abortion. In his dissent, Thomas noted, as he has in the past, that the High Court treats gun rights as a kind of optional right in the Constitution that state and local governments can play with at will, while it consistently treats abortion as though it were actually included in the conversations in Philadelphia back in 1787. As described by Law.com, one case involved a New Jersey man who sought a permit to carry a weapon because his job as a supplier of automatic teller machines made him a target for armed robbery. Of course, it's important to remember that the Second Amendment doesn't say the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed if they face specific threats. He didn't get his permit, by the way. In the dissent which Kavanaugh joined, Thomas contrasted the court's reluctance to take on the New Jersey case to the alacrity, the cheerful willingness of its liberals, demonstrated when it comes to protecting the right of every woman to abort the child growing in her womb, a right invented out of whole cloth in 1973's Roe v. Wade, the most shameful, he says, ruling since the Dred Scott decision, another malicious masterpiece of Democrat reasoning. However, considering the relative age of some other members of the High Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is 87. Stephen Breyer will be 82 on Election Day this year. There's a good chance that the man elected in November will have replaced at least one justice by the time January 2025 rolls around. Should that happen, this president would have put 3 people on that High Court. That's really something. Twitter announced recently that users soon will be able to add voice messages to their tweets. Up to 140 seconds of audio, according to Axios' Sarah Fisher, who wrote, "The idea is to let you immediately record and post what's happening around you, or your thoughts and reflections. To listen, tap the image of the user in the center of the voice tweet. The tweet plays while you continue scrolling." This feature rolled out to a limited number of people early last week, and it will be unveiled for all Twitter users in the coming weeks. The Federal Reserve is planning to get rid of the dollar and to move us all into a one world digital reserve currency. And getting rid of the physical currency is the granddaddy of them all as far as a surveillance state is concerned. Why? Because they will now be able to detect every single purchase by every single person every single moment of the day. Are you proud to be an American? Yes? Then you are part of the 42% of Americans who also are proud to be an American. 42%. It's not half. A new Gallup survey of 1,034 adults living in the United States found that 42%. They said they were extremely proud to be an American. 21% said they were moderately proud. Among the Democrats, that number was only 24%. Now, some of that has to do with who's in the White House when the poll's taken. However, increasingly, the liberal wing of American voters has been shifting away from American values for over 100 years. Pride in being an American has dropped from peaks achieved in 2003 as the U.S. initiated the Iraq War. Then 86% of Republicans and 65% of Democrats said they were extremely proud to be an American. Today, that number has been cut in half. So what changed, you ask? Well, the increase of internet and online news outlets. Not to mention the overt and obvious, often brazen, push toward liberalism by the mainstream media. A San Diego gas and electric employee had his arm dangling from the truck window and was reportedly cracking his knuckles, unaware that a man who had been following him snapped a picture and shared it on social media in a now deleted tweet, accusing Cafferty of making a white power gesture with his hand. Picture this. Hand out the door. One, just snapping fingers as he went along. The gesture Cafferty was supposedly making is widely recognized as the OK sign, with the thumb and forefinger making the circle, the rest of the fingers all splayed out. Although the grainy photo in the news outlet shared looks more like a modified rock concert gesture or Italian devil horns, as his index finger was pointed outward. But according to the Anti-Defamation League, the gesture can also be used to signify white power, which began as a hoax, but has now been legitimately co-opted. Imagine that, riding along in your truck, somebody standing on the street, got a problem with it. New Jersey just added anal sex to its learning standards for 8th graders. Did you hear that? Anal sex for 13-year-olds. In an 8-4 vote by the State Board of Education beginning in 2022, 8th graders will be required, if they're in the public schools in New Jersey, to be proficient in what they call gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. According to the bill, they will work to, quote, develop a plan for the school to promote dignity and respect for people of all genders, gender identities, gender expressions, and sexual orientations in the school community. They will then discuss, quote, whether and when to engage in sexual behaviors, and the various factors affecting their ability to give consent to sexual activity. And then they will be taught that abortion should be seen as a positive option. The culture has shifted to embrace this choice. Our children, as early as preschool, are currently being exposed to alternate lifestyles, costumed homosexuals reading to preschoolers in libraries, high schoolers being taught how to advocate for community policies, policies that promote transgender identity and expression, meaning all genders and all gender expressions, and will analyze the influences of family on the expression of gender, sexual orientation, and identity. And they will be taught abortion as a positive option without choice. That is, if parents do not object, which of course they could. In New Jersey, as in most other states, all students will be automatically enrolled in all lessons without parental permission, perhaps without knowledge. If you don't want this, you have to take the initiative to opt out. That's an important change in public education. It is a complete sea change, going one way, circling around, and now heading in the direct opposite way. After the vote on June 3rd, Planned Parenthood Action Fund of New Jersey issued a statement under Answer and Advocates for Youth, thanking the Department of Education for voting in their coalition's recommendations. The guidelines have been modeled on the so-called National Sexuality Education Standards, which is an official sounding creation of SIECUS. SIECUS has been around since the 60s. It's a series of 6 letters standing for Sexual Information and Education Council of the U.S., as well as other big players in the sex industry. So I should say sex education industry, not in your school. Today, SIECUS partners with the Southern Poverty Law Center, the Human Rights Campaign, and Planned Parenthood. And their effort is to transform sex education across the nation. Why would so many big money power players get into the sex education business? Well, because sex education is not really about education. It's about a whole lot more. According to SIECUS, sex ed for social change is a vehicle for creating a generation of young people who affirm each other's identities, and it's a vehicle for racial justice. It's a golden opportunity, they say, to create a culture shift on LGBTQ rights, white supremacy, and reproductive justice. Reproductive justice is another word for abortion. The new standards in New Jersey are part of what proponents call comprehensive sexuality education, CSE for short. CSE is an agenda-driven curriculum that sexualizes children and promotes the concept of sexual rights and radical sexual ideology for small children, young children. Sexuality information should be taught to children, they say, quote, without shame. It appears, however, that New Jersey didn't go quite far enough for this coalition of pressure groups. Their top priority for New Jersey was to remove the state requirement that sex ed lessons stress abstinence. When one board member suggested asking parents permission before enrolling children in these new controversial classes, his idea was completely dismissed. Parents still have the right to opt their children out, but you, the parent, must take the initiative. The Family Research Council has created a universal opt-out letter that can be sent to schools every year. After 25 years at the helm of Whitney Young High School in Chicago, Joyce Kenner finds herself the target of an online petition posted by unnamed, disappointed alumni calling for her to resign, claiming she has silenced student activism from speaking against all forms of injustice. Her silence and her enabling of the systematic oppression of her black and low-income students should be condemned. So far, it's gained more than 800 signatures. Did I mention that Joyce is a black woman? A black woman who grew up in the days of Martin Luther King, the civil rights demonstrations, the marches. She asked her son, now 30 years of age, if he thought there had been progress. His response was, absolutely. We have a black police chief. We have a black mayor. We have a black CEO of Chicago Public Schools. But we still have racism in our society and black men being targeted for no reason at all. Kenner once had to explain to police that he had a baseball bat in his trunk because he played for the Whitney Young team. Now, she's the problem. In Seattle, they're chanting about beheading people who don't get with the ideological program. This is in the tradition of the blood-drenched French Revolution. One man says, this festive block party is pretty dark, man. He claims to have been forced to extinguish a fire in his own place of business, which was deliberately set by a vandal. Not only could this guy not get the police or the fire department to come help him, he was falsely accused by the mob of holding up the vandal or thief at gunpoint. As he explained himself to the mob, he bravely warned, quote, this kind of mob stuff doesn't work, end of quote. The mayor? The mayor says Seattle's fine. Don't be so afraid of democracy. At the nation's capital, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said there are 11 statues currently standing in the U.S. Capitol building that she wants removed. Currently, she wrote 11 statues representing Confederate soldiers and officials are on display as part of the National Statuary Hall collection in the U.S. Capitol. Among these 11 are Jefferson Davis and Alexander Stephens, President and Vice President of the Confederate States of America, both of whom were charged with treason against the United States. So, what are these statues doing in Washington? Celebrating the death and destruction these figures left in their wake? Or remembering adversaries who left unmistakable marks on our nation? At the end of the day, these statues are just pieces of metal, but they stand to represent unforgettable figures in American history. Erasing that history from our memory doesn't change anything, then or now, except to forget how we got here. Oh wait, maybe that's the idea. Theaters are facing an existential threat from on-demand services. The movies Trolls World Tour, which hit streaming services in April, netted $100 million in 3 weeks just from North American on-demand sales. Movie chains remain adamant that releasing Hollywood hits on demand at the same time they debut in theaters cannot become the new normal after the pandemic. However, their years-long resistance to the idea is facing pressure as movie studios begin to weigh the benefits of showing movies in theaters that can't seat at full capacity due to social distancing guidelines. And I would add, don't seat full capacity at any time. The last 2 or 3 times I've been in a movie theater over the last 30 years, they weren't full. This week, the City Council of Minneapolis voted to completely disband the police department. Once implemented, pundits believe this will plunge Minneapolis into a third world scenario of lawlessness and total chaos. a fact. Minneapolis and an enormous number of immigrants from Somalia is now the #1 radical Islamic terrorism recruitment city in America. Today, nearly 4 out of 5 truckers across America will refuse to make deliveries to cities where Democrats have defunded or abolished the police. At our southern border, Pew Research tells us that of the 84% of youths apprehended, most are 16 and 17 years of age. Since October, more than 57,000 young people have crossed the southern border unaccompanied, meaning without a parent or a guardian. Most come from Central America and cross into the U.S. through the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. Fewer than 1% of the children caught this year were younger than 1 year of age, and only 2% were 5 years old or younger. But at the U.S. Supreme Court this week, Chief Justice Roberts and 4 liberal Supreme Court justices ruled against the Trump administration's effort to end the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, the amnesty program. President Obama created DACA with an executive order in 2012. You would think another executive order could undo it. We'll see. Have you ever thought about stealing iPhones? My boss told me he had his iPhone stolen from him on the beach in Florida back a few months ago. According to Fox Business, the new owners of Apple iPhones that were taken from the company's stores in recent days are getting notices from the company that they are currently in possession of a useless piece of glass, metal, and silicon. A piece of metal that's currently tracking their every move. Liberty University in Virginia just finished its spring semester without any coronavirus cases. That despite receiving sharp criticism over its president's decision to keep the campus open for students. Liberty University President Jerry Falwell Jr. was widely condemned for his decision to reopen the campus to students who had nowhere else to go back in March. He said, "We have a campus built for 16,000. 1,200 students came back to stay in the dorms for 7 weeks, and they were students who either didn't have high-speed internet, had elderly relatives living at home, or were international students." As the semester comes to an end, Falwell announced that there were no cases of COVID-19 on campus. "We are thankful to God that no one who lived in a campus residence hall or who worked in a campus office tested positive for the virus. No positive COVID-19 test anywhere in our region was linked to Liberty students who returned to their dorms after spring break." And inquiring minds want to know, how can this be? This has to be a miracle. No, not a miracle. And finally, literally, the rioting wasn't about race or justice. It was about power. You saw people beat a woman in Rochester, New York with a 2x4, smash in the head of a man seeking to defend his store in Dallas, killing a retired 77-year-old policeman in St. Louis who was protecting a friend's pawn shop, burning and destroying thousands of stores, looting everything from Rolex watches to automobiles as if they were the Visigoths sacking Rome. When such wanton destruction is occurring, normal people have no choice against overwhelming force. If there's no army or police force to protect them, they will either die or surrender and hope that appropriate fawning will buy them, or at least their families, a modicum of safety. Perhaps that survival instinct is what led our governing class to kowtow to the looters. The Democrat Party of Fairfax, Virginia tweeted, quote, "Riots are an integral part of this country's march toward progress," end of quote. Subtext, get used to it. Oh, and Hillary Clinton's former spokesperson, Brian Fallon, sent a message to defund the police, as if a nation without police could be anything but a barbaric, lawless mess. That's some of the things that were happening here in the United States while you were busy trying to make a living, raise your family, and do the right thing. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about what's been going on around the world next, right here on the Bible Forum.